And you see, over the last 9 months, Zechariah had had to listen a lot. He couldn't speak. He had listened a lot to God. And what Gabriel had started telling him 9 months ago was, you're going to have a son, and he's going to be special. But he is going to be different. Your son will not drink strong drink nor wine. He will live in the wilderness. He's going to wear camel-haired vest and leather girdles. He's going to eat locusts and wild honey. Your son's going to be a little different. But he's also going to be very special. He's the forerunner to the Messiah. He's going to go proclaim God's coming. He's going to turn people to God. Oh, your son's going to be different, and he is special. When it came for that moment, Zechariah was trying to say, I'm not going to name him after me. He isn't supposed to be me. He's going to be himself. I've heard God say he is special, and he is different, and he's going to do things for God. Name him John. You know, today we're having a special event. It's the first time, but we're having a book signing going on in Threefold. You know, we've just opened Threefold a little over a month ago, where you can go and get Starbucks coffee, you can buy books, you can buy gifts, get on the internet in there. It's just a time of fellowship and a great gathering place. But following each service, we're having a book signing going on in Threefold, and it's a children's book that you can go and you can purchase. It's a wonderful children's book. It's a book entitled Zack the Prairie Dog. And I can tell you, Marsh and I have purchased one for our grandchildren. It's a great book for every child and every grandchild for the message it has to bring. But the book has been written by Steve Decker. And Steve Decker is a member of the St. Luke's family of faith, he and his wife Debbie. And he has written this book, and it's a fascinating book. The reason that he wrote the book is also very interesting. You see, Steve and Debbie were married, and they finally started getting around to having a family, and they had a wonderful son named Matthew. 16 months later, after Matthew, they had Nathan. But between that first and second birthday of Matthew, they felt he wasn't hitting his developmental markers. But it wasn't until he was 2 years old that they finally were at a specialist, and he had gotten old enough that the specialist was able to say, Matthew has autism. And Steve and Debbie said, you know, our life took a turn that we would never have expected. It wasn't going to be the life that we had planned. But they loved their son, and he is a fine-looking young man. They loved this little boy, and the one thing they said was, you know, the one thing we're grateful for is that he will have a younger brother here, Nathan, who is normal, will always be there to be able to take care of him. But over the next year, Nathan didn't hit his developmental markers either. And they finally took him to the doctor and discovered that Nathan has autism too. Lightning had struck twice. Sometimes you and I don't realize just how prevalent autism is in our society. Did you know that 1 out of every 150 children will have autism? It's an incredible epidemic that seems to be happening in our society and growing at incredible rates and for reasons we don't understand. Steve and Debbie certainly loved their sons, and like all good parents, at nighttime they would sit down to read their children a story. But you know, Steve said, I came to realize something. Did you know that there are no children's books where autistic children are the heroes? No children's books that lift up and say autistic children are really special. So he decided he needed to write that kind of a book. Now the only problem was he had never written a book, and he didn't know how to illustrate a book, but he felt called to write one. And it was one morning when he was doing his daily devotional, reading the upper room, that the scripture that day was from 1 Corinthians 12, verse 4, and it started talking about how God has given everybody a special gift, and we all have different gifts, but we're called to use those gifts. And he felt God was calling him to use his gift. Everybody said it's impossible, you'll never be able to write it, you'll never get it published. Debbie was the one who was there to support him and say, you can do this. It took him 3 years. And he wrote the book in rhyme because autistic children relate better to a sense of rhyme. So he wrote the book in rhyme, he learned how to use the computer to create the illustrations, and he now has written this wonderful book. It is a book that has been nominated now for a literary award for books for special needs children. It is a great story. But Steve said, I wanted to write this book to honor my sons. I wanted to write it so that maybe people would see my sons for who they are and not their autism. And the great line that he had in the book was about the character of the prairie dog, Zack. The prairie dog and the dachshund, the two characters, they represent autistic children. And the line that he says is, Zack says, when he saw himself through the eyes of others, he was sad. But in the eyes of heaven, we are all special. And I thought, how true. When we see ourselves through the eyes of others, we usually feel sad. But it's in the eyes of heaven that we are all special. John had been listening to God Zechariah had been listening to God long enough to say, I know my son is going to be different. Eating locusts and wild honey and camel hair and leather girdles and living in the wilderness. But he's going to be special. In heaven's eyes, he's very special. When you find that life has taken a turn you didn't expect, start looking at yourself and others through heaven's eyes. And remember, we are all God's children, all special with something to offer.